From Lighthouse Reports, this is Backlight. Every month, we take you behind the scenes into the world of collaborative investigative journalism.
We're your hosts, impact producer Tessa Pang
and investigative reporter Beatriz Ramalho Silva. So last year, I was hosting this podcast, speaking to some of our editors and our reporters, digging deeper about how Lighthouse investigations work. But this month, we're coming to you with a bit of a different episode. I'm joined by my colleague Tessa, who's going to be hosting with me.
Hey, Beatriz.
And in this episode, we're going to give you a preview of what you might hear from us in Season 2 of Backlight.
That's where we got some of the testimony about people being held in shipping containers at this petrol station.
What we got next, which was kind of a surprise, was the final model file. And this is basically the code that you run to get people's actual scores.
So just to backtrack a bit, for those who don't know who Lighthouse is, we're a nonprofit that produces investigations, and we focus on topics that are underreported, but we feel really matter to the public. At Lighthouse, we have the kind of rare ability in the journalism space to spend months and sometimes even years looking into one specific issue and to really get to the bottom of the story. Beatriz and I are lucky enough to be based in Barcelona, but our team is actually scattered across the globe, and we have specialist skills that you might not find in every newsroom.
Yeah, so at the heart of every Lighthouse investigation is collaboration. We work with media around the world to report on issues like how secret algorithms are being used to target those on welfare, or how financial speculators are making money from food crises, and how the EU is funding and enabling human rights abuses at its borders. Basically, things that are essential for the public to know but might not get reported on because it takes resources that go beyond a singular news outlet.
And that's one of the cool things about Lighthouse, is that one singular investigation spans across so many outlets and in so many formats and languages across the world. So you, as a reader, might see a Lighthouse investigation on the front page of your national newspaper, or you might listen to it in a podcast, or might see it on the nightly news or in a documentary. But one of the downsides is that as a reader, you only really get a snippet of the story, and it's often hard to reflect the process that might have taken months or sometimes even years of work in that one article or that one video. So this podcast is kind of our answer to that problem.
So Backlight is our monthly podcast that allows us to dive a bit deeper into our investigations and bring you the behind-the-scenes process that doesn't make it into the publication. The point here is to give you inside access on how investigations are conducted, the challenges of working in a collaborative journalism environment, and generally to demystify the whole world of investigative journalism.
Big task. So last year, Beatriz, you were hosting Backlight by yourself. How is the 2024 season going to be different?
Yeah, so last year, each episode was focused around one investigation that we just published. This year, we're going to speak to our regular contributors about their investigations as well, but shift the focus to a broader conversation around the tools, the methodologies, and the approaches in investigative journalism. We're also going to broaden the scope and speak to people across the field of investigative journalism. So this could be people that are working on funding or impact or convening conferences.
So each month, we'll take a topic like, what does a day in the life of an investigative reporter look like? Or what are some of the unique tools investigative journalists use? And we'll chat to someone in the field so you can walk away with a better understanding of how to use these tools and to understand the world of investigative journalism a bit better in general.
Like last year, we spoke to investigations editor May Bowman about how they used drone footage to expose how refugees were being arbitrarily detained and tortured at secret facilities in Europe.
When I went to Serbia, we were trying to work out what was happening in Hungary. And I went with two Serbian journalists, and we had a drone with us, and we were able to lift the drone and basically have a good view of this kind of transit zone that the border police there have, which we established that they are using on a really regular basis, like numerous times a day, to bring people who, asylum seekers in these prison vans and bring them into this transit zone. And then there's a kind of gate in it, and they would push them out of the gate. So we got evidence of them doing that. And then we had the other Serbian journalist was on the ground with a camera right outside that gate, and would then ask them what had happened to them prior to being pushed back. And that's where we got some of the testimony about people being held in shipping containers and at this petrol station. So yeah, but that did, it was a lot of kind of waiting around as well, because we'd go for like a large part of the day and just watch what was happening. But I think that was a really important element of the investigation.
Your chat with May was really interesting because when you watch the Black Sites investigation, you just see those breakthrough moments of when asylum seekers are being pushed through the border gates. But you don't realize it's actually accompanied by hours of the investigators just sitting there and waiting for those crucial moments to happen.
Yeah, and we're also going to speak about some of the more creative and unconventional ways we get the evidence we need.
Yes, like dressing up as a hunter and hiding in the forest.
This is not a spot you can just easy hang out to wait till the next pushback is happening, because it's in the middle of nowhere. There are not really places to hide. And as we know, the European external border is like highly surveilled. They have like thermal cameras, they have drones, they have helicopters. So what we also figured out, we're seen, we're watched.
Yeah, so last year I spoke to Nicole Vogele, who's a journalist and filmmaker, about how we exposed masked men violently pushing back asylum seekers by making friends with local hunters.
Then had some hunters who we could trust, and they took us, in the morning at 3 a.m. when it was still dark, through a back path to a certain lookout point. So we didn't have to cross the open field. We couldn't have been seen that well by a thermal camera or all of these things. And then it was just a matter of patience. We were at one point dressing ourselves up as fishermen so that if they would at all see us walking there from, I don't know, from their helicopter or from their high towers on, they would think like, the three Bosnian fishermen are going to fish again in the border river. So they were not alert.
And on top of the challenges of investigative journalism, of which there are many, we'll also tell you how we get to those breakthrough moments.
Like the moment that we got the data that allowed us to reveal the full extent of how the Dutch city of Rotterdam was using a fraud detection system to deny welfare to some of the most vulnerable people, as told here by Eva, our data editor.
What we got next, which was kind of a surprise, was the final model file. And this is basically the code that you run to get people's actual scores. And the way we got that was initially through FOIA. We requested the final model file through FOIA. It went to the courts. We had a court hearing. And then kind of on the sidelines of that court hearing, we negotiated with the city, and they basically said, yes, you can have the final model file, but it kind of as long as you run the results that you get by us before you publish, which we would have done anyway. There was an interesting little tidbit that we did hear them. They didn't realize that some of our group spoke Dutch. They were talking kind of by the water cooler, and they basically said, we'll give them the final model file, but this is going to make us look really bad. So we were pretty excited for that victory.
For reference, you can find the links to all those previous podcasts in our show notes.
So this season, we're going to keep chatting with our regular team about their work. But we're also going to be inviting people from across the field in journalism to cover topics like how to nail funding proposals for journalism, or how to make sure that your reporting has real-world impact, or even how to use TikTok as a journalistic tool. We're going to take you inside as well some of the world's renowned investigative journalism conferences.
Yeah, for me, listening to season 1 was really cool because I don't come from the world of journalism. So even though I work really closely with you guys, sometimes how you get from point A to point B is a complete mystery to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem across journalism and investigative journalism in general, is that there isn't always an understanding of how you go from one piece of evidence to building an entire cross-border collaboration, or what goes into investigations that have real-world impact. And that's what we're trying to achieve with Backlight.
So if you're an aspiring investigative journalist or someone who's just curious about the tools journalists use to hold people in power accountable, Or if you're like me and you just want to understand a bit more how your colleagues actually do their jobs, then I guess Backlight is for you.
And just to give you a bit of an idea about who we are, so I'm Beatriz, an investigative reporter, and I'm working across a few newsrooms at Lighthouse. At the moment, I'm working on investigations in the borders, the food systems, and the surveillance newsroom.
And I'm Tessa. I'm an impact producer, which I feel like is one of those job titles that could really mean anything. But it basically just means I try to make sure the work we do makes tangible change. And often that looks like connecting our findings to policymakers, activists, and the communities affected, or strategizing about creative ways to get our investigations in front of new audiences. I'm mostly focused on our food systems work, but I also work across our other newsrooms too.
Both of us are based in Barcelona, where we're actually currently recording this podcast. And we've just recently moved here. I got here last November.
And I moved last week, so very fresh to the city. So thanks, Beatriz. That sounds like a very exciting season coming up. And for everyone else, we'll catch you next month. But in the meantime, you can follow us on our social media on Twitter at LH Reports. And we also recently started a Blue Sky account, so you might get the unique opportunity to be one of our first 10 followers on Blue Sky under the same username. And we'll link both of those in the show notes as well.
And you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which is at lighthousereports.com. And feel free to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, where you'll be hearing from me and Tessa next month.
Okay, bye, Beatriz.
Bye, Tessa.